All right, we're gonna wait another minute and then we'll get started.
So it's mostly cloudy, not a cloud in the sky out there right now.
All right, let's go ahead and get started then, and others will join us. The recording's on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this work session to order with the Homelessness Leadership Council to discuss the alcohol tax. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Miss Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Miss Kennedy.
Here.
Miss LaFrance. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Perez-Verdia. Miss Quinn Davidson. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Miss Salatel.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. As usual, members can get in the chat to get in the queue. If you can't access the queue, text me. So this is the last of our meetings with community partners to continue our dialogue regarding the alcohol tax. Some time ago, members should have received a proposal from the Homelessness Leadership Council. So today we have Dr. Dick Monsager to do a presentation, and then we'll have a dialogue with Dr. Monsager about the items that the Homelessness Leadership Council has put forward regarding the alcohol tax. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Monsager.
Thank you, Felix, and welcome for the opportunity. I'm Dick Monsager. I have been serving as staff to the Homelessness Leadership Council since it started a couple years ago. And I'm going to try and see if I can share my screen, and then I have just a brief presentation that I'm sure invite questions. So can you see that?
Yes.
I've done this correctly. Okay. So just a very brief minute or two background as to what is the Homelessness Leadership Council. This is a group of business leaders who came together on the invitation of the mayor 2 years ago. And the purpose of the group is to help ensure that the vision in the anchored home is brought to fruition by education, by maintaining and guiding strategic vision, by mobilizing and aligning resources, by building public will, supporting implementation, and to try and advance public policy. It's an advisory group. I'll just list the members very quickly for those of you who may not be aware of who's is serving as members. Carol Gore from Cook Inlet Housing and the mayor are the co-chairs. Other members are Sophie Minnick, CEO at Siri, Greg Deal, the leader of Wells Fargo, Greg Cervana, vice president at Widener Apartment Homes, Diane Kaplan, CEO at Rasmussen, Pastor Matt Schultz from First Presbyterian, Mike Abbott, CEO of Mental Health Trust, Brian Butcher, CEO of HFC, Paul Landis, a vice president of GCI, and Preston Simmons, who's the president of Providence Health and Services Alaska. And one other comment I'd make to begin with is this group has been very reticent to give advice unless there's a strong majority. So the charter for the group requires that before any recommendations are made for policy, that at least 80% of the members have to be in agreement. So that was what had to be achieved before these recommendations were put forward to you. The group worked, it's hard to believe we sent this to you on July 12th, the summer's come and gone. And we, like many other groups, were working in May and June to say, what do we think should be done with alcohol tax? So that's what I'll now put forward to you. Hopefully you have the written copy that has more details. The members spent a lot of time talking about, okay, rather than just putting together a bunch of ideas for how much money to spend, what are the principles that we think are important to achieve with this resource now available to the community through the alcohol tax? And the principles are what you can see on this slide. Some of them are self-evident, but I just want to make a comment or two. First one being all investments should contribute to a healthy, safer, and more equitable Anchorage. And we've heard a lot of conversation about equity this summer. The HLC also wanted to put its voice forward that equity is an important goal. Second principle, to increase the availability of substance misuse treatment and more behavioral health services. Number three, coordinate investments with community partners and trying to leverage funding so that alcohol tax monies aren't just a standalone isolated pillar. The investment decisions should be data informed, and we would recommend to the city that all grants and city partnerships with other organizations should require that quality utilization of the HMIS, the Homelessness Management Information System, should be required for organizations to receive municipality money. There should be regular reporting of measurable outcomes, and that whenever possible, multi-year operating funding commitments should be made to encourage nonprofit organizations to standing up new investments and training of staff and services. So with those as principles, the recommendations are for...
Actually, apologies for interrupting, Dr. Monsager. Before you continue, just want to note for the record, we've been joined by, I believe, Ms. Quinn-Davidson, I believe Mr. Constant, and Mr. Dunbar. And if I missed anyone else, let me know. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Dr. Monsager.
Okay. And feel free to ask me any questions, interrupt me whenever you want. So 4 recommendations, but before I get to them, I want to make one point here is there was a lot of dialogue about whether to put together specific dollar recommendations for these various elements that I'm going to talk about next. I've been listening in all of your work sessions, and whether it's been in the municipality departments or the Theory of Change group, other groups have come forward with specific dollar recommendations. The HLC has come forward and has said it's not our place to exactly say how much money should be invested out of the alcohol tax. We want to talk about the programs that should be funded, but that you all have the decision to weave together alcohol tax, other city revenues, the ML&P sale revenues, and the CEOs in the HLC said, without knowing much more about the already existing operations commitments, they were very reticent to make specific dollar recommendations. So what I'm talking about next, I'm sure some of you would say, well, tell us how much money you guys think we should spend. And the HLC is not going to do that. It's going to really say that's your job through the fall now as you weave together all of the various fund sources. But with that as a prologue, 4 things are important from the HLC's point of view. One, obviously, reduce unsheltered homelessness, provide year-round shelter capacity. That's a journey you all have been on, and I want to thank you for that. Thus allowing year-round outreach and cap abatement. Number 2, increase the availability of substance misuse and behavioral health services. Number 3, increase housing. And number 4, prevent and respond to child abuse and sexual abuse. In recommendation 1, and you guys, or the assembly has gone a long way over the last 2 years down this road, and the HLC just wants to endorse that and continue the growth of these 4 priority areas. Making sure that there's adequate emergency night shelter year-round, facilitate the development of daytime engagement centers so that people aren't on the streets and using the businesses lobbies and library and other places as daytime places, that there should be outreach into the unsheltered community year-round, and you all have funded the first journey into that area right now, and I want to commend you for that this year. Camp abatement, the HLC endorses year-round camp abatement so long as there's adequate night shelter. And from the conversations I've heard, I think that that's been the majority view on the assembly. And that investments in camp abatement should be coupled with the investments in outreach and navigation. And then the 4th item, transportation and other supportive services. One of the things is we've been listening as the resource hub at the Sullivan stood up this summer, is there needs to be a small fund source to that some agency or the city can spend quickly to support people transporting things, transportation to and from job interviews, to see apartments, etc. And we would encourage a small fund source for that purpose. Recommendation number 2, mental and behavioral health services. There's been a lot of conversation over the last month about standing up Crisis Now, other behavioral health services, and we would endorse that. And this would be not to cut or defund police services, but to use this new fund source to expand mental and behavioral health services, and for the police to do what they do, and then to stand up a much more robust service to reach out to people and support people in crisis. And then at the time we put this together, it was unclear whether a residential treatment center for substance misuse could be stood up quickly or not. And so we put it forward as, if it's going to take a while to stand that up, then put some money out into potentially into grants to get expansion of substance misuse treatment stood up as quickly as possible. If it's possible to stand the treatment center up quickly, then put the money into that. And this is obviously one place where alcohol tax money, the MLMP sale money, for example, interact probably pretty substantially. Number 3, I want to thank you all for what you've been doing with the CARES Act money, for trying to keep people in housing. With alcohol tax, we would encourage that there be some ongoing funding for rapid rehousing in the way you're doing right now through some of the CARES Act money, that to help people with short-term support as they get back on their feet after they drop in crisis, if they have ended up in homelessness. And then, as I've talked with some of you before, I've talked with a committee of the Assembly to incentivize and support existing and new permanent supportive housing for adults. The folks that have the most disabilities and vulnerabilities need support, not just housing, and permanent supportive housing is cost effective for the community. Juneau is the best example I know of in recent years. They stood up Forget-Me-Not down there over the last 3 years. And the data really shows in Juneau a substantial drop of 60 to 80% in police costs, EMS costs, hospital emergency room costs. And that's been true across the country, but we need more permanent supportive housing in Anchorage. And I would encourage some kind of incentivization and support so we can expand the amount of PSH. I don't think there has to be a lot of money a year. From what I've seen in other communities in Anchorage or in Alaska, there's a small gap between what's billed revenues to Medicaid, what you can get from housing vouchers, and a small incentive could be quite useful. Then number 4 is evidence-based grants to prevent and respond to sexual abuse and child abuse and neglect. And then also the HLC endorses what the Anchorage Health Department has proposed of expansion of early childhood education, pre-K programs. Our specific recommendations would be to prioritize this expansion into Title I schools first. My dream would be eventually pre-K is available to any family that wants it in the whole city. I think there's good data to say this really makes a difference in future school success, job success, less substance abuse, etc. So with that, I'm going to see if I can, how do I quit sharing my screen? And then I'm open for any questions people want to ask me or dialogue among yourselves or whatever else I can be helpful for.
Great, thank you. So if members can go ahead, put themselves in the queue if they have any questions or comments. Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Dr. Monsager, for the presentation. I appreciate it. It seems to align quite closely with the priorities put forward by the committees on homelessness and the Health Policy Committee. I want to touch briefly on permanent supportive housing. You and I have had that conversation, and we know that that is, with the gap analysis, a considerable need. But I do have some concerns about scaling permanent supportive housing quickly due to workforce issues and kind of stability of state funding. So could you talk a little bit more about that particular recommendation, or not only that, but how that interplays with the idea of rapid rehousing? I think rapid rehousing is a concept that members are somewhat familiar with, but maybe not within the same depth as permanent supportive housing.
Sure. So unfortunately, we all drop into lingo very quickly, and I did, and I thank you, Ms. Alatel, for calling me on it. When we think about the vulnerabilities and problems people have if they drop into an experience of homelessness, sometimes it is a very brief experience. They lose a job for a month, they get evicted, but they have family resources and they can quickly get back into housing. Those people have lots of support systems, and it doesn't take very much, and lots of times it doesn't even need much public money. Family systems might be able to help them get stabilized. Then there are folks that might not have family systems, or pick on women that have had to run away from an abusive partner, and they need support for a few months, but they've got job skills. They can get a job. So if they can get support, say rental subsidy for 4 to 6 months, some case management or social worker support and therapy, it doesn't take very long and they're independent again. That's what we call rapid rehousing. And then there are folks that have had either chronic substance abuse, they might have traumatic brain injury, maybe they came out of an accident or a war experience with traumatic brain injury. They got schizophrenia, they have not been able to hold a job, they've been in and out of homelessness for several years. They were failures in school, they've come out of corrections, so they got felony convictions. People that have those kind of mixture of things usually need something called permanent supportive housing. And the permanent is a bit of a misnomer. Some people might move to independence or a lot, very close to independence. Other folks need a lot of support. Some schizophrenics, for example, maybe need almost observed medication therapy to be able to sustain housing. And permanent supportive housing is expensive. We as a community are paying the same amount of money or more in the way we currently do things with police calls, EMS, in and out of hospitals, in and out of corrections. So it's in some respects a choice of how we spend money. But our community is no different from most communities in America in that we don't have enough permanent supportive housing. To your question, Ms. Alatel, about workforce, I share your concern. I don't think we can scale up at the most more than 40 to 80 units a year or every 18 months under the best of circumstances for workforce. I would be thrilled if we could add another 80 units in the next 12 to 18 months and then make them keep on going. And from what I know from the gap analysis, we should aspire to adding probably about that much every year for the next several years. I don't know if there's either money or workforce to be able to scale up that fast.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Are there any further, Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Monsager. I do have a question in regard to a comment that you made about the information system, the HIMS. And it sounds like it might be an important piece to all this, or maybe even a critical piece. And I wonder if you would speak more to that, because one of the things that I heard out of those operating the Sullivan Arena shelter right now is saying that to a certain extent, some of that requirement for getting people into that information system has tied their hands in some cases for making a rapid response to a particular individual. So I just wondered if you would just speak a little bit to the significance and how married this plan might be to making sure that that information system is really implemented. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. I would say the state of the HMIS data system in our state, I would give it a grade of C at best in terms of usability of information system. It needs to be much more usable at the user end, and I think you heard that when you visited the Sullivan. It is too slow and cumbersome for data entry and for places that don't receive government funds, for example, the Gospel Rescue Mission and Downtown Hope Center. They end up doing this work with volunteers, which is hard. I think the system will work better in the years to come when the partners that do have size and scale have more time for training, when there's money that has been put to make it more usable for the front-end users. For example, Rasmussen Foundation and a couple other funders are putting some money into the system to improve the usability of it. The coalition, I think, has a key role in some places for probably locating staff to do data entry. But the vision of this is that when referrals are made, that you can quickly find out where somebody is or where they were within the next few days and can find them. When we visited Houston, they've spent a lot of time and money and some money on the usability end, and they now have it as a cell phone enabled tool that their outreach workers, if they're looking for John Smith because John Smith came up on a housing queue, they can quickly find out, oh, 2 days ago, John Smith was over at such and such a site, and it helps to find somebody. That's the set of tools we need to get to here in Anchorage. From the provider's point of view, we need to both use carrot and stick, in my opinion. We need to improve the usability, but it also needs to be an expectation of the workflow that everybody working in this system is using this common database so that John Smith doesn't get lost and have to do the whole intake process over again at the next agency.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So next I'm going to read a question from Ms. LaFrance. She asks, where can I find the data on the cost savings associated with Juneau's approach with supported housing?
What I can do is I will send you, and you can distribute to members, both the 1-year data and then more recently 2-year data from Juneau that isn't so much cost data as it is the drop in calls and use of police, fire, EMS, and hospital emergency rooms. The study is being done by the University of Alaska Fairbanks. They engaged them at the beginning when they opened that program 3 years ago to try and get several years of data to try and get at this question that Ms. LaFrance is asking.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, not a question, but I just wanted to ask you, Dick, if you would carry back to the folks on the Leadership Council how grateful I am. The flexibility folks are approaching this moment with. It seems like we had a really good approach a year ago and a year and a half ago, and then of course everything changed. And so everyone continues to press forward, and where there were holes, where there aren't now, people are flexing, and where there are holes now, where there weren't before, people are flexing. And that kind of ability to move forward together is, I think, what's going to be the secret sauce or the magic ingredient that does transform our system in this moment of crisis into what we've long held out as our hope for Anchorage. So thank you to your peers.
I appreciate that. I'll convey that. Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Is there any further comments, discussion, questions from the members? All right, not hearing anything. Ms. Zalatel?
Sorry, I wasn't fast enough getting all the buttons pushed. Yeah, I have a question, Dr. Monsager. Is there anything that the Assembly or the Committee on Homelessness can do to be of service to the Leadership Council? I know they interact primarily through the coalition, and if that is the point of contact, I just want to make sure that the lines of communication are open all the different ways. So I just wanted to toss that out there as an invitation or a question.
I think, Ms. Zalatel, my response would be that this is a group that envisions it's on a road to self-extinction. That as the coalition credibility continues to grow, the HLC would like to see that be the source of trusted information in the community, and that this group will ease more into the background and in support of the coalition. All of the partnerships you and the Committee on Homelessness have made with the coalition, I think, should continue to be that way. And I would not be surprised if the HLC will decide to go, it is no longer needed by the time the snow goes away next spring. We shall see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up one last time if there's any other comments, discussion, questions. All right, not hearing anything, then really want to thank you, Dr. Monsager, for the presentation and the dialogue from the Homelessness Leadership Council.
Thank you so much, members, and Mr. Rivera, thanks for the opportunity and best wishes on this tough job now of sorting through. I think my closing comment would be, last week you heard from me as a part of the group with Tiffany Hall and Recover Alaska and other folks. And so I've been thinking this week a lot about is this today different or not? I think the difference is these are business leaders kind of putting together pragmatically and not so much at what are the root causes so much. But I am so thankful you're doing the hard work you're doing, and thank you so much and best wishes.
Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to close this work session. This is our last one for the day, so everyone have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.